We had left off last week on the general topic of Kibbud Avayim. There was a note that I wanted to touch up on that too. Again, referring to Moore's question from last week, I wish you were here this week. He asked good questions. He made a comment to the effect of the diminishing relevance, is the way that he put it, of the nuclear family. It's definitely a backstreet concept. Mothers and fathers have different roles to play. In other words, you can look at this from two different perspectives. There's, on the topic of Kibbud Avayim, just to be clear, there's the family-centered approach where the parents both have roles to fill and they both specialize in certain things. They're both, either one of them could be better suited for one particular role or the other. And there's the child-centered approach where the kid just needs certain things. It almost doesn't matter where the kid gets them. You could look at it either way, from the supply perspective or the demand perspective, but they're both perspectives are true. So, the very fact that the Torah warns us to be, just with the order of the words, to be extra careful about fearful respect of your mother and extra careful about showing honor almost in an affectionate way to your father, just because this isn't the natural inclination, tells you an awful lot about the different roles that they play, right? And it's not that you're not physically afraid of your mother, or that you should be physically afraid of your mother. It's that you're less likely to express your emotions, your understanding and appreciation of this relationship in a kind of a fearful way, right? And again, the classic expression in English, familiarity breeds contempt. It's very difficult to maintain formality with someone who's familiar. And the more familiar they are, the more difficult it becomes to maintain that. Remember in linguistics we used to describe this as, there's basically a sliding scale between precision and formality and convenience and speed, basically, in speech. So no one speaks to a friend or a roommate or a sibling the way that you would speak to a grandparent or a police officer or a judge, a doctor, etc. There are situations in which you're at work, you're on a job interview, you hopefully pay a little more attention to your grammar and your vocabulary. Or if you were born in the 1990s, you don't care about either, just write however many mistakes you can fit on a page. But there is such a thing. So your mother, at least historically, was much more present. I mean, she was constantly there, the one who was the home, effectively. Your father was working, probably waking up early, leaving the house, coming back. At the very end of the day, maybe at the end of the week, the end of the month, at the end of the year, people traveled, and travel was very difficult. So the perspective of the child was that the father was distant, was inaccessible, somehow behind everything, in the sense that he was supporting and providing for things, assuming risks for the family. So travel meant danger. Going to work, people, money, situations get complicated. And your mother was the closer, more tangible, more immediate, more available, half of the parenting unit. So your attitude to the two of them was different. And the likelihood that you were going to interact in a particular way was, it's so clear that it appears in the Torah this way, so as to teach you that, you need to relate to the both of them with both respect in the positive sense and in the negative sense. There are things that you will do and things that you won't do out of respect for your parents. And just, take note of the fact that you're logically going to be inclined to behave a certain way, probably because of the way you view your parents or the way your parents interact with you. It doesn't exempt you, exonerate you. It just means that you need to work extra hard on what doesn't come so naturally. That's all. Regardless of the different roles they're likely to play, the different positions they fill, you're still going to need to work on both aspects of both relationships. That's the point. So the question that was asked, and it's a good question. The fact is, it's possible. It's possible that my grandmother's grandfather was killed in Morocco. Somebody has money. Who knows? So her grandmother was pregnant with her father and raised him alone because she was a widow. She got remarried at some point, but that was just the reality. So it is possible for a woman to raise a child on her own. It's very difficult, if you're honest, it's very difficult both psychologically and metaphysically to understand those kinds of relationships. And the fact is, they don't always work out so well. It's very difficult to grow up in a house where one parent or the other isn't there for whatever reason, illness or death or divorce, etc. It's very tough to raise kids on your own, and therefore it's very tough for the kids to grow up with a respect for both men and women, fathers, mothers, to grow up to be competent fathers and mothers without having had good examples there. You could tell me all the stories in the world that you want, and I'm sure the progressives have entire bookshelves written about this. It just doesn't hold water. Kids need both. It doesn't mean that your father has to be violent and aggressive, or that your mother has to be a pushover. It just means that they're both good for very different kinds of support and education and help, and they're both equally important and useful, even if they're not always viewed that way. So it's not hard to explain. Just like physiologically, a woman could get pregnant and then have a child on her own. It's physically taxing if she doesn't have any help or support, so it's emotionally taxing too. She will get emotionally much more tired dealing with kids on her own than she would if she had the help and the support of someone else. But not just anyone else. The kid's biological father fits into this picture, and not for nothing. There's a tremendous importance to that. So we're certainly not apologizing for the culture of single parents. It's just that the situation is what it is. It doesn't mean that it can't be done. It's just extremely hard. You can kick and scream all you want, but that's the reality. I get to see this on all different ends, like what happens before, during, after a marriage, divorce, the kids and what have you. It's just tough. Just because there's a lot of kids that go through it doesn't mean that it's easier or better or a more viable alternative to the nuclear family.
One quick question. So we said that yirah here, literally fear. Although we said,
That's the next 3 words we're about to read. Is the definition of murah. The definition of murah, yirah. What does that mean?
Okay, well, my question was going to be, in other contexts, like in the common phrase, yirat shamayim, is it the same context?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You're a very low level of fear of Hashem is, I'm afraid he's going to kill me. Because he's probably not. People generally don't die overnight. Eventually it's going to happen. Hate to sound depressing, but at some point we're all probably going to die. For me to tell my kids, be afraid of Hashem because he can kill you, so you can go ahead as an experiment and do the craziest thing you can possibly imagine, crash into a school bus or something, and see if you survived that night. And if you did, then how does that affect your impression of God and justice and reward and punishment and fear, etc.? People... Israel is still releasing terrorists who've managed to live for years after they did whatever they did, and they're still here. So what does that mean? So, fear of Hashem because he's going to kill you, how much is that worth? It is worth something. It's important to know that Hashem controls the world. Whether or not he chooses to execute people like this, one after the other right away, is obviously Hashem's prerogative. The more constructive fear of Hashem is, why would I want to do this to my Creator? Why would I behave in such a disrespectful way, such disregard? Why would I want to ignore my Creator? Why would I be so insensitive to the purpose of my creation, the purpose of the creation of the world, the purpose of the creation of matter, of material? Why waste things? You ever training a new employee at work, and the guy was amazing. This guy's been to prison 11 or 12 times. So he's handy with a knife, I'll give him that, but didn't win all his fights, you can tell by looking at him. But he's a friendly guy, and he's honest. So, we're sitting there taking apart a quarter of beef, and I was showing the guy how to do this the right way. And if you cut all the muscles at the seams, and you respect the anatomy of them, you get these big, beautiful, clean-looking muscles. The guy was blown away. He's like, it is amazing how each and every one of them has its job and its shape, and he knows how to read. It's like he'd been to school at some point. But he was just blown away by the anatomy and how everything connects and fits to certain pieces and just works and moves. it's an incredibly intricate thing. So I was telling him one of the purposes of taking things apart this way is just not to waste meat. Like if you take the muscles apart in nice, big, clean pieces, it has little bits and pieces falling off and leave too much stuck to the bone. It's just an efficient, effective way of working. But it also means that you have some kind of respect for it. You respect the material, you respect the product, you respect the fact this could feed more people if you take it apart the right way. He was really touched by that. So, well, he's gone through periods of poverty in his life, so he appreciated that. So at any rate, yeah, you will not get far telling people be afraid of God because He can kill you. It's just not going to evoke much emotion, because regardless of what you do on any given day, Hashem will probably let you live to see the next one. If anything, you should be afraid of people if that's what you're concerned for, because people might come after you and kill you, and Hashem probably won't, at least not so quickly. It's not that He can't, it's just that that's not a helpful or productive way of looking at that relationship. It's not going to bring about many changes in behavior, and for the simple reason that it's just not that tangibly true. You just don't see that much of it. You do see it occasionally when you see someone get into a crazy accident, or God forbid, a terrorist attack or something. See that it can happen to you, happen to someone just like you, a little older, a little younger, whatever, but the fear that we're talking about is much more associated with a fearful respect, meaning not just there are certain things that I do for God and certain things that I don't. It's the attitude that I'll do certain things out of respect and I'll refrain from doing things out of respect. And that's because every relationship is composed of these two components. I'll give you my classic example. I still think it's true. If a man really loves his wife, he can buy her flowers, buy her jewelry, write her really cute, affectionate cards, cute text messages and emails. If he's doing all those things for his secretary, there's just something wrong. It's not that he's not being affectionate with his wife, it's that it's supposed to be understood that there are certain things he won't be doing with or for other women, which is what makes the relationship meaningful. Because it's meaningful when someone's caring and affectionate, and when they're not that way with somebody else. That's the missing component of such a thing. So you have to be, in the proactive sense, caring and affectionate and sensitive and attentive, etc., and not do all of that, at least not the same way, for other people. And that's why it's a relationship. Things that you do with and for your spouse, and things that you don't do with or for anyone else, and that's what makes the relationship special. That's what I've understood.
I just wanted to point out also that what you said it would make it much more difficult for, let's say, a woman who was previously married and is no longer married for one reason or another, and a man in the same scenario to try to live a normative life and to try to raise let's say they both have children coming into the second marriage. It's incredibly complicated.
It gets hard. The kids don't always get along. The parents don't always get along with the kids.
Fine and dandy when it's all black and white and fits into these little boxes.
No, I hear that. I mean, it is what it is.
The stigmas in the society.
I've seen a lot of situations where people got married and it worked out. It depends what the expectations are. And, the kids sometimes oppose it. The kids, I mean, you don't want to see your mother or father lonely and depressed and not interacting with people. So you want them to be happy. Happiness didn't work out the first time. Maybe they'll have a second crack at it, and that's fine. And it can work. It gets complicated, but the reality is, and it's encouraging, there are some really good remarriages. Someone who is in an abusive or neglectful first relationship, might have a much greater appreciation of what it means to be in a productive and positive one. So
they might have learned what to look for the second time around.
Sure. That, and I always explain to people, I mean, it's tough. I know people don't get that, but just because, so I, for example, have found a very hard time. It's almost easier to make shidduchim people who've been previously divorced than for someone who lost a husband or a wife. I found a lot of people who are just freaked out by that. But if his wife were still alive, he'd still be married to her. I can't help but agree with that. You're quick. No, I can't help but agree. Yeah, it's not like he wanted her to die. That kind of comes with the. It sounds callous. I'm sorry, but she died. If she were still here, he'd be married to her, and she's not. So he's gone over the whole mourning process, been through this. Still wants to live. still wants to
I
be
think what the
happy
person's
and
getting at though
finds
is that there's no closure, whereas in a divorce there may be more. It might be more stretched out.
divorce, you might see her again, you might run into her and have to deal with her, you might have custody issues, so you see each other every time you exchange the kids. There was a story like this Upper West Side a couple of weeks ago. This couple had such a contentious divorce that they had to exchange the kid at a police precinct. Literally, it's like, here, it's your time, so I have to give him to the police, and the police give him to you, and I give him back to the...
The person's alive. At least you have the potential to have closure.
The end of that story, by the way, was that he went up to the 52nd floor of his building
Yeah.
an hour before. You heard about the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
What happened?
Amsterdam and 60th.
Yeah, it was.
He
Tell us
went,
about
he went up to the roof of the building, this guy. He was actually from Fairlawn, by the way. He went up to the roof of the building, threw the 3-year-old kid off the 52nd floor penthouse, and then jumped after him, and they both died. So, yeah, crazy situation. So, closure? Someone passed away. He or she's not here anymore.
We should have Jenna first.
Yeah, right. So, after, and then the wife commented on this, and she's like, it was just another way of him showing, like she was still mad about the whole, like still talking about the divorce. She's like, see, that was just another way where it was all about control, and it was all looking for control. I'm like, man, you forget that you lost your husband, you lost your son. I mean,
The husband, she didn't care anymore. But,
I guess.
I guess the idea for widows is that there is still feelings. Probably that's the reason why.
Well, yeah, but
It's not like she or he hates the spouse, like on a divorce.
right, in divorcing, right.
Yeah.
I know his wife is still alive, but he hates her.
Yeah. So that's fine.
Which like works for me. I don't know. I mean,
Is he Jewish?
I don't know. They were Russian.
Ukraine, Ukraine, I think. I
Ukrainian.
heard Ukraine.
I heard Dmitry something, and I was like, sorry to hear it.
That's
So yeah, I don't know if they're Jewish. I don't think so. Anyway, they didn't go to my show. So yeah, that's just it's a tough thing. But at the same time, they're really good step parents. I know kids that really lucked out with a good stepmother or a good stepfather. So it's not always a negative thing. In fact, if the first father was abusive or the first mother was negligent and infatuated with herself, the kids might find more affection and more, you're smiling like you know people from California. We'll location next week, Sheila, to be determined. So you can really luck out if you had a really bad parent. There are bad parents out there. We'll talk about bad parents in a minute. You can luck out where your stepfather or stepmother may in fact be more affectionate, more understanding, more attuned to what it is that you need than someone else. Yeah, and just to give you closure on this whole widower thing, I mean, there comes a point where you appreciate the fact that he or she has passed away. You go through the mourning period, and the fact that you still have feelings for someone, the fact that you still have feelings at all, is actually just a manifestation of your desire for affection and a caring relationship. And I'd be freaked out if someone lost a husband or wife. Like, yeah, whatever, break a few eggs to make an omelet. Who's next? Like, that'd be bizarre. You'd not want to introduce anyone you care about to someone like that. If you think about it logically, you would expect someone who lost a spouse to say, yeah, he or she was someone really special, had some great times together. It's terrible that, no longer here. Life is going to have to go on, and you come to a point that you want to do it. Same thing goes for a divorce. At some point you say, look, this is terrible, it's not working out. The more time we spend together, the more we suffer. Let's just euthanize it. And, at least
I
hopefully
would still
find
expect the
happiness.
widower to take longer to get over their spouse's loss, or the loss of their spouse, than a divorcee.
You haven't seen really good divorces. Sometimes the process takes forever. Sometimes the fights go on. Sometimes no hard and fast rules.
And you pay alimony when you're divorced.
Yeah,
You don't.
yeah. Horror stories I can tell you guys. All right. Anyway, not to discourage anyone, but yeah. So on that topic, we got it right away. Got on that alimony.
It was scary because it sounded like she was talking from experience.
No,
I was like, I didn't know what.
you better be on your best behavior. Because if you're not, Starts with an A, it rhymes with...
That's fear of.
That's good, yeah.
Fearful respect, yes. Fear of retribution. So the question becomes, what does it mean, mura? So kavod, it's almost easier to understand. When you have respect for someone, you see the positive signs. So go back to this crucial concept. It's a very deep metaphysical concept. Every single relationship has to be composed of two components. Otherwise, it's not a relationship. I can be friendly and cordial with everyone. That doesn't make it a relationship. A funny example of this would be, you walk past people in the street, right? And you say, hi, holds the door, thank you, that was great. Okay. I wouldn't stop from my busy day and take out time to discuss or converse with someone unless I actually cared, to be callous, unless I cared a lot about what he or she might have to say or was going through. So I have to have a certain relationship with some of the doormen and doorwomen in my building. Some of them are certainly much friendlier than others. And you can, appreciate that someone, takes the pains of actually saying good morning with a smile, or actually getting up, opening the door when you went to Costco and you got all these heavy boxes and bags in your hands, things like that. So, they take the time to inconvenience themselves and help you, so you almost feel like you're doing the same thing, but you wouldn't do that for everybody. So what we're used to seeing is, we are used to defining kavod as the proactive manifestations of a relationship, and we really don't get, in this generation, much less than previously, the negative. I don't mean negative bad, I mean negative as in things that involve restraint, refraining from certain behaviors or certain discussions or activities. So I don't talk to any other woman in the world the way I talk with my wife. If I spent that much time or went into that intimate detail over whatever topic it would be, that'd be really bizarre. That'd be like, why would you do this when you're married? So some people don't get that. It's not the time to get into this whole French concept of hugging, kissing people that you're not married to, or that are married to someone else for that matter. Not a very spiritual concept. But there are certain things that you would expect someone in any kind of serious relationship, not just to do for the other half of the relationship, but not to do out of respect for the relationship. There are things that you do not do, and that's harder to define because things that you don't do aren't so visible necessarily. So, in the language of the Torah, Ve'ezu mura. So, what is the fearful respect we're supposed to have for our parents? Or maybe, if you want to translate it that way. Ve'ezu Kibbud. And what is the definition of honor or respect? Mura. When it comes to defining what we typically define, it's a pretty quick translation just to say fear. It's literally what it means. It's not necessarily what it implies. When it comes to this fearful side of the respect, you don't stand in your father or mother's regular place, and you don't sit in his or her regular place. Yeah, it's copied right out of the Gemara. What does that mean? If there's a particular place that your father or mother stand in or hang out in, think about that. It would be disrespectful of you to occupy the same space. Classic example, it comes up a little bit further, but if, for example, your father or mother have a regular seat at the table. So my father would sit at the head of the table. Actually, we used to eat dinner before he came home because he was working really late, but as he was able to come home a little bit earlier, he had a regular seat at the table. And it would be disrespectful of me to sit in my father's seat. So I could be, friendly and affectionate and do all kinds of nice things for him. But by me not sitting there, I'm saying just as much about this relationship as I am when I do nice things for him. So I can buy him a card on his birthday or on Father's Day or whatever and say, greatest dad who ever lived, and here's a card. But not doing certain things out of respect for him is the whole other side of that coin. That means that not only do I do nice things for him, I reserve things for him. I reserve a seat for him. A certain place, if it's, items of clothing, if it's jewelry, whatever, I don't know, just things that you would normally be inclined to make use of, and you wouldn't because this is your father's or your mother's. Ima sits at this side of the table or at that one, or whatever seat that she chooses for her, And the kids need to know we're reserving this seat for Imam. You can sit in any seat that you want, but not this one.
They're basically two sides of the same coin. I mean, taking the example, I've seen a couple of people stand up for their father when the father has an aliyah. So to sit down, I mean, I guess
Standing up for your father would be a sign of kavod. That would be a proactive, actually, it's every time your parents enter the room, in theory, you're supposed to be doing
Like
this.
a
That's what's in
vav-
halakha. But we'll talk about this concept of riyah. It's possible. Your parents can just not require you to do that. They can relinquish this entitlement. That's something else. But so getting up would be a positive, proactive thing. Let's say your father has a particular seat in the Beit Knesset, or your mother for that matter. Then you not sitting there is a constant manifestation of respect. You want a funny example of this? I'm listening to I guess a comedian would be the right word, who said that, asked somebody if he believes in God, and the guy was like, no, what are you talking about? 20th century, then it was the 20th century. 20th century, we've advanced beyond this. This guy's like, what, you believe in God? He said, absolutely. Absolutely. He's like, well, what God do you believe in? He's like, I believe in Jesus, I believe in the God of the Hebrews, I believe in Allah. He's like, I believe in all of them. Like, what do you mean? He's like, well, why take the chance? I'm sure one of them's right, It sounds funny. I mean, I guess that's what he's making fun of, was this idea that believing in Hashem is one thing, and then you have someone not worshiping Avodah Zarah. So here the Torah already addresses this guy, this clown. You have a relationship with Hashem, you do certain things for Hashem, and you do not do the same things for other gods. You have Shabbat, you have the positive mitzvot to do these things on Shabbat, like Kiddush, enjoying the Shabbat, right, onig, and then you have things, so you can eat any day of the week, you can eat your Shabbat leftovers the following day, but there are certain things that you prepare for the Shabbat, that you bake for the Shabbat, that you do for the Shabbat, and there are forms of work that you don't do. So if Shabbat was just about doing the same things you do every day of the week, but more, it'd only be halfway there. There have to be certain things that you don't do on Shabbat, and you do during the rest of the week. Matter of fact, says the Rambam, if you're really poor, you should do something during, even if you don't have a job, you're unemployed. You're unemployed, go strike a fire, go write letters somewhere, or go, fix someone's socks. Just so that you can fulfill the mitzvah of not doing your usual weekly or daily labor during Shabbat. So you might be unemployed. I'm unemployed every day is Shabbat because I don't work. I don't answer the phone, no one calls me. I don't have any mail to open, I don't cut any checks. I do nothing because I don't work. So says the Rambam, you should make your efforts to do something, meaning do something asur on Shabbat during the rest of the week. So that you can make the Shabbat special. You define the Shabbat. You give it some kind of definition by doing things like this.
I guess you would send resumes if you're looking for.
Yeah, but you might print them on an electronic word processor, which would mean that you not necessarily have violated the writing letters because of the way you used to write. So that's one aspect of it. Another is that Chazal knew very well that we as people have this incessant instinct to correct each other. And one of the things that you do not do to your parents out of fearful respect is that you don't contradict them. Good luck.
I feel like by existing I'm contradicting.
Yeah, I'll be 36 on Pesach. I maybe know 2 people like this. Hasn't happened in my lifetime. So what does that mean? Someone says something and you say, no, that's not true. I don't think that's the case. I read the other day, or I just saw here, etc. Or I saw on Wikipedia, so it's got to be true. Those are the kinds of things, the kind of interactions, discussions that you can have with your friends, with your colleagues, your co-workers, neighbors, etc. When it comes to your parents, it's considered, at least halachically speaking, extremely disrespectful to contradict your parents. Even if you're pretty convinced that they're wrong, there's a respectful way to mention it, there's a disrespectful way to mention it. So these are the examples that are given by the poskim. Don't tell me this is any less common today than it was back then. If anything, back then I think we're much more respectful of their parents. So what happens if I have a dispute or discussion with my mother, and my mother says something, and I say, "What? That's crazy. I don't think that's true." So this would have been a classic violation of a biblical principle, mind you, biblical concept. Okay, I don't care what hashgacha is on the food that you're eating. This is actually written in the Torah not to do this. You will have violated this concept of having a respectful fear of your parents. We're going to do such a thing. So There are ways out of it. I mean, there's a polite way to do it. If you do have some kind of a dispute or some kind of a discussion, you should not contradict your parents. As a matter of fact, one of the opinions brought here in the Torah says that it's not even respectful if one of your parents, your mother is talking with one of your neighbors, and the neighbor says something, and you says, no, I agree with Ima, because it almost implies that you usually don't, or that Ima needs your support. That is to say, she might have been wrong in this argument if it weren't for me taking, her side. But to say, she's my mother, like, I'm not even party to this debate. It's not my place to tell her that she's right or that she's wrong. Not my father's place. My job is to respect. That doesn't mean that you obey everything they tell you to. Let's just keep this mitzvah in perspective, right? That's not to say that if your parents tell you, for example, to violate a mitzvah in the Torah, that you're going to do it. There's a respectful way to not do it. So one of the examples brought by the Rishonim and the Achronim is that maybe you can say, if I'm not mistaken, it's written somewhere. I think try to say that without a rude facial expression, But if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw somewhere. I might have read somewhere. Maybe it's not. So if your father's having a discussion with somebody, he says something that's just not halachically true, to ask you what your opinion is. You can say something like that. I think I remember reading once in a book, etc. It's not me disputing you or arguing with you. It's just that there may be evidence to the contrary. That's about as far as you can go without getting disrespectful and saying, oh, it's just wrong. You fold your hand here because you lost this discussion. So to make it sound like, here I approve and here I disapprove, or here I support what you're saying, but usually I contradict it, it's a little bit borderline in the eyes of some of the poskim. Another classic example. Don't ask me why. I don't know who came up with this concept. That kids refer to their parents by their first names. I'll have you know that it's not as uncommon as you think. I know personally kids who do this. I never understood why. I mean, one of them, his dad is crazy. I could see that, but hard to find good reasons why anybody would want to do this. I can tell you that it's done. I will add, by extension, that you owe the same respect to your spouse's parents as you do to yours. So I don't know why people are in the habit of calling their in-laws, for example, by their first names. It's commonly done today, so all I can say in defense of it is that we do have a halachic concept we'll have to talk about more next week, that technically, if your parents have relinquished their kavod, then they can release you from these obligations. So it's possible, for example, that you work in the same business as your father. Let's just assume for argument's sake you're Syrian, and you're in the same business because that's what's done, and your father thinks this is a good idea, and you as a businessman think otherwise. So maybe it's not disrespectful if your father says, well, give me your honest opinion. So if normally in the course of conversation, I don't want to dispute my father, I don't want to argue with him, don't make him feel bad. If he says something like, I want your honest opinion, don't tell me out of respect, fear, etc. I need to know, are we buying this, are we buying that? Do we go with this vendor, with that vendor? Should we invest here, should we invest there? He may think one thing and you may think something else. It's possible that your father say, well, I don't view me as your father for this particular thing, or don't treat me any differently with another one, don't give me a different answer than you give anybody else. And halachically speaking, a father, a parent, who relinquishes her respect, the respect is considered relinquished, halachically speaking. So I did no wrong. If my mother thinks I'm weird for standing up when she comes to the room and says, please stop doing that, so there's nothing wrong with me not doing that anymore. I'm basically honoring her request, or honoring her, her wishes. So maybe we can say in a kind of roundabout way that in this generation our parents are not very demanding of respect, which is probably why they don't get any. At the same time, I'd make a serious point for parents needing to demand a little respect from their kids. I hate to say it, it's so not politically correct, but it's true. That as a parent, you need your kids to respect you. Not respect you in a Godfather mafia kind of way. Respect, like they need to have an appreciation for what you do, and they need to treat you differently because of it. So if I'm the one who goes to work, and I'm the one who pays for things, and you keep on breaking them, you are displaying no respect whatsoever for what I do. I don't care if you're 2 years old. Okay, fine. 2 years old, maybe not, but 8, 10, 11, and we're already getting to disrespectful territory. Listen, when you pay your own bills, you can do whatever you want with your money and with your belongings. As long as I'm paying for these things, I need them to be respected. If your kids treat you the way they treat someone from their class, you're doing a really bad job as a parent. If you can't teach your kids that there are people that have more more experience than them, and therefore deserve more respect, you've failed them. You've basically put yourself on par with everyone else in their lives, and there's no reason for them to treat you any differently, and they won't, for that matter. And therefore you'll find some very insightful shiurim. I've heard some beautiful shiurim on this topic. Even if you as a parent don't care where you sit at the table, it's probably more instructive and more productive for your kids to know that you have a place, to give them a place they can associate with you and say, that's my Ima's seat. And I don't sit there because that's where Ima sits. Even if she's not there, if she's not home, I'm not going to sit in that seat. Because I have an Ima, she's someone special, and this is what you do for people who are special. I don't do this for everybody. I can sit wherever I want in my class, or at the playground, but I'm not going to do this to my Ima. Abba has a seat, this is where Abba sits, and therefore I don't sit there. If Abba has a special siddur that he prays out of, it's his book. If Ima has a special sefer Tehillim, etc. It's all the same concept. We need to take advantage of these opportunities to teach our kids these things. And you can do it in very tangible ways. Any kid, I'm telling you, literally a year and a half, 2 years old, all of our kids know that there's a seat for Abba, a seat for Ima, and they don't sit there. That's it. They'll correct each other too. 4-year-old will say to a 3-year-old, you're sitting in Ima's seat, you have to sit somewhere else. You've seen it done. Right? So it's helpful to them. They grasp these concepts from the simple, tangible, most visible ways, and then moves on to other things. Now we're having arguments with our kids, or discussions with them about, when Abba or Ima tell you something, your gut reaction doesn't need to be, that's not true. Your gut reaction needs to be, whether or not I agree with that, I'm hopefully going to do it. I'm going to do the right thing because you're my parents. That's what it means. Otherwise, there's no substance whatsoever to this mitzvah.
What's the word?
How else do you...
Sorry. What's the word used for contradiction?
Listor. Listor with a samech tau resh. Listor means to undo or to
Destroy.
To contra. It can mean also to to undo. Yeah. So Torah not livnot in Shabbat. Someone who so on Shabbat the Torah forbids you from building things. What happens if you're breaking things? You're breaking things. Asur midrabanan. It's rabbinically forbidden. Don't break things on Shabbat. Why? Because you might come to fix them if you regret what you did or whatever. So what happens if I'm knocking down a wall that I want to rebuild into something else, make a bigger arch or connect 2 rooms or something. So here, all the Tanaim are in agreement. This is what's called sotar manat livnot. It's destruction that's a part of reconstruction. It's basically a part of the construction process. So anyway, listor is to knock down, to undo, to listor with a tet is to slap. Shifli. Talk more about this a little bit next week. Some more precise, specific examples. Otherwise, you can practically exercise this with your kids. But it's not too late for us, even in our age, to rethink some of the things that we do and say to our parents. They may not demand it or expect it. It doesn't mean that you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah by doing it. If your parents aren't especially adamant about certain things, it still doesn't mean that there's nothing to be gained by doing it for you, for the sake of the mitzvah. This is my parents. I respect and appreciate this. You can try standing up when they come into a room. I think it's nice. I think it's really nice for the kids to say that you stand up for your parents. Dirty little secret about parenting is that if you're very informal with your parents, your kids are probably going to be that way with you. So if you'd like for them to appreciate or respect something about your relationship with them, you're going to have to do this with your parents. Right? It's very hard to do as a parent. But if I catch my kids saying, no, I don't care, that's not true, why should I listen to you? Might be because when my parents tell me something, I don't necessarily give it the same degree of reflection and thought and consideration that it deserves. So the kids may subliminally have picked up on this, and something I can correct in my relationship with them that hopefully manifest in the way they relate to me. So we'll continue that from here next week.
Just a quick
Yeah.
Lemase example. Do the same